and they line the sidewalks with every sort of shiny thing.
From basement jazz clubs in Brooklyn to best-selling, Grammy Award-winning artist, in the space of just 10 years, Gregory Porter has established himself as one of the major voices in 21st century jazz, and he's even been credited with bringing the genre back center stage. He's now releasing his 6th album, All Rise, and he joins us virtually to tell us more. Gregory, thanks so much for joining us here today. Can I start off by asking where you are right now?
I am in California, in Bakersfield, California, my hometown.
Ordinarily, you're a very prolific performer, but unfortunately, you've had to cancel your tour, all of your shows, because of the COVID-19 epidemic. So how have you been channeling your artistic energy at this time? Have you been doing concerts for your family?
I'm still writing songs. I mean, I just made a record, but I'm still writing songs. I call and communicate with my musicians, but the latency in the phone prevents us from working on music at the same time. Yeah, I've just been kind of creative writing, and my son, my 7-year-old, we like to make songs up together. So it's been a lot of fun.
A lot of jamming at home. Now, despite, as I said, a shutdown in live music, we can still get a taste of your new album, All Rise. Here's the track, Revival.
When you lift me higher, out of the fire, out of the flames, I lost the fear when you give me meaning again. I'm singing revival, revival song. I'm singing revival, revival song.
Now, Gregory, that video starts with a segment from some newsreel footage describing an altercation in Los Angeles, an incident, a problem involving white police officers. And there's a mood of social justice about it that feels very topical right now, given the anti-racism protests that are going on around the world. I wanted to know when you wrote that song and if you had the Black Lives Matter movement on your mind when you put pen to paper.
Yes, I did. The song, the feeling, the energy that it's asking you to pull from some source of strength to create a revival within yourself, within society. This feeling of social justice that's popular now has been popular since the beginning of the existence of people. This is not anything new. I wouldn't write the songs that speak of social justice if I didn't desire for such a thing. And so, yes, before the protests that have happened in the last several weeks, it was something on my mind and on the mind of jazz musicians, pop musicians, hip hop artists all over the world. Yeah.
Indeed, as you said, you pledged your support to that movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, on social media when you quoted your own lyrics saying, "Raise your fist in the air and be sweet." Now, some people are saying at the moment that being sweet and gentle in this movement isn't going to have any real effect, that the fight needs to be more assertive. What do you think?
When there is violence and destruction of property, sometimes you can lose that person that's in the middle. We have to be careful to follow the most effective form of protest, nonviolent protest that Dr. King employed. But I would say that to protest, to raise your fist up in the air, to scream loud, to ask yourself to be noticed, I think that is sweet. I think that is sweet.
Now, on that new album as well, there's a track that caught my attention. It's called Mr. Holland, and it touches on a teenage romance which involves a young African-American person.
You invited me into your home, treated me like I was grown.
Now, it made me think of the film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in many ways. The song raises the issue of mixed-race relationships, and I wondered what sort of message you were trying to get across with that song.
I'm actually resurrecting an experience that happened with me. You might ask the question, why would you write a song of thank you to a person who treated you like a normal Joe, a regular guy? Because chances are you didn't get treated like a normal Joe or a regular guy or a regular teenager. I was trying to have a teenage experience, you know, and it didn't turn out that way. I resurrected, revived my memory of it, and it went the way that I wanted it to. What I'm asking the listener to find in the song is to treat people basically by who they are and what's inside. It's the golden rule, you know, treat others as you would, you know, but it's a very difficult thing to achieve.
And indeed, the experience of being in a mixed race relationship is something that you touched on in your podcast with film director Ama Asante. The podcast series is called The Hang, and that was a really enlightening conversation where you exchanged perspectives on that social question. Now, you've spoken to artists like Kamasi Washington, Jeff Goldblum for that series, and you talk about things like art, culture, life. I wondered how you found being on the other side of that interviewing process.
I enjoyed it. I realized I was having all of these great interviews with people like yourself. And I said, wow, I'd like to do something like that myself. I like to make my own questions. I like to get deeper into the artist's mind, learning people's process and how they bring their genius to art. Also helps me as an artist. It's a master class for me to sit across from Annie Lennox and talk to her about her emotions, her roots, and her upbringings. It's a master class for me to sit in front of great filmmakers and photographers and artists. It helps me in my journey.
I think it's entirely possible that we could see you seek from music into broadcasting, because apparently, I believe music wasn't the original plan. As the story goes, you were a sports scholar, you were a footballer, and then I heard that there was an event even earlier than that in childhood where a comment about the singer Nat King Cole planted a seed in your mind. Can you tell us more about your connection to that legendary jazz singer?
Nat King Cole was the music of my mother. I wrote a song for her and put it on a tape recorder, and she said, boy, you sound like Nat King Cole. And I didn't know who he was, and I went through her records and played her records, and just the music and the sound that washed over me was amazing. She said I did something like somebody. And my father wasn't raising me and didn't raise me. And the idea that I did something like somebody intrigued me. And so I just imagined, my little head, I imagined Nat King Cole as my father. Sometimes music touches people in a very intimate way. So now that I have a career, I'm quite thoughtful about it and thoughtful about what I'm saying to people.
And Nat King Cole was so important to you, in fact, that you recorded a tribute album to the man himself in 2017. Let's get a taste of some of that music.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost nipping at your nose, Yuletide carols being sung by a choir, and folks dressed up like Eskimos.
Now, Nat King Cole was an artist who was able to bring jazz and swing sounds to a very mainstream audience. He was a hugely popular, successful artist. 100 years after he was born, how do you see the place of jazz in the music industry?
Jazz has influenced and been influenced by a whole bunch of other music. If you listen to Robert Glasper and listen to how he's influencing other artists by mixing the genres. You think of an artist like John Mayer, Erykah Badu, who are actually could be full-time jazz singers, but they also mix other genres into what it is that they do. Jazz is still very influential. The last 8 to 10 years, I've had sold-out shows all over the world. So jazz is still valid, and people still love it.
Now, you mentioned your mother there, both personally and professionally, how important she was to you. And you're a parent yourself now. You have a son. And I was wondering what, if any, there were any childhood lessons you're drawing upon now at a moment where I imagine you're spending a lot of time at home with your family.
Even if you listen to my music, if you listen to the song I wrote for him, Don't Lose Your Steam, and another song, Daydream, you know, even a song on this record, All Rise, a song called Concord. It's about flying all over the world, but coming and finally, the most precious thing that I do is coming home, back home to family, back home to him. I think about legacy a lot in my music and what it is that my mother gave to me and what it is that I want to give to him. I think about the relationship I had with my father and how limited it was and how little he gave me. And so sometimes I just sit with him and I you know, if there's a piece of wisdom that I'm thinking of, I like to give it to him. I don't know if he'll retain it, but I want to know that I'm giving him something.
As you said, the title of this latest album is All Rise, and for me, it really evokes uplift in a dark time. It made me think of the phrase, in fact, a rising tide lifts all boats, which is very optimistic. Do you think this is an optimistic record? Do you think we can all rise above the political divisions in the world right now?
I know we can. This is a thing. This is an existential question. We must, and we will. The world is going through a difficult time with this pandemic, and we realize that we have to depend on each other. We can close the borders and we can look in another direction, but quite frankly, the way that this is traveling around the world, we have to think of each other and consider each other.
Very wise words there that I think we'd all do well to follow. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gregory Porter.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
We'll leave you with a clip of another track from that album, If Love Is Overrated. That's from Gregory Porter's All Rise. Do check in with us here on Encore for more arts and culture next time. And otherwise, there's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
If love is overrated, let me be the one that is deceived. Let me find that your hands that are touching me is not the hands that's supposed to be. Your lips an illusion.